Well, I think he actually validated it with you. So if it was a good joke, then I approved as well. If not, I didn't.
Yeah, so hi everyone here in Helsinki and everyone later on watching this. Welcome to our talk. Well, the title, it's a bit long, but let's go skip over that then. Yeah, I'm Guido. I've been working with Robot Framework for about 8 years now, and I've been in the testing world for about 13.
Yeah, my name is Frank van der Kuur. I've been in IT for over half my life, and I've been a tester for almost a decade now. And I've met Guido back in the day when you could go on a road trip with a 50-year-old VW van that runs on crude oil. And back in those days, Guido was working for one of the Dutch energy grid operators. And we were tasked with automating a SAP landscape. Well, good luck with that. And, well, we started off in the best way you can do that automation, and that is that we were starting to use the robot framework. So we knew the vehicle we wanted to travel in, and we knew our destination. But the rest of it was full of pitfalls and lessons learned, and that's what we're going to talk about during this trip. So we're going to take you on a road trip. But before we do that, actually, let me take a picture of you guys, because I need to fill 17. So if you all wave. Yeah, thank you. So, at least that's the first picture of our road trip. If you don't have 8 stickers yet, make sure you do, because you get glasses. And you can wear them outside, because the sun shines. So, like I said, we were working with the robot framework. And we started off in the same way I think everybody does. And that is that we just put everything in the test cases itself. It's the fastest way to make the jaws of your colleagues drop to the floor, especially if they saw you painstakingly clicking around manually for the past few months. But as long as you're able to ignore the fact that you want to reuse things, you can get away with it. But there will be a day when you think, well, I've got to reuse some things, and by the way, I'm spending half my day fixing all kinds of stuff. This will be the time where you have to well, make sure you fix this, otherwise that jaw dropping will definitely be over. Now, we came up with, I think, the same solution in as everybody will. And that is that we've put those keywords in resource files. Like I said, nothing new under the sun there, but it did came with 2 very important foundational conventions of our architecture. And the first one being is that we didn't want any communication to the system under test directly from the test case, but we only wanted those directly from the resource files. So that was the first convention. And the second one is that we needed to find a logical way to split up our resource files. And since we were working on a desktop application and a web application, we came up with the idea to split those up into screens or windows, if you will. But actually, we came up with 3 types of files. The first one being a common file, which would take care of the starting up of the application, closing the application, and other basic stuff. And then the second type would be those screens or windows. And sometimes we split them up even further if the functionality on that screen was just huge, because we wanted to make sure that our resource files stayed compact and readable and maintainable. And the last one, that was the functionality that was on every page. So, for example, the header functionality, the footer functionality, or the navigation functionality. So, by now, maybe it was still a mess, but at least it was maintainable and reusable. But just one thing, make sure you only include the resources that you're actually trying to use.
Yes, and then we come to, so we covered that one, and then we start to actually dig our next pitfall ourselves. Because one of the things that you will start to wonder is, should I put my locators maybe in 2 variables, or you have test cases failing because the keyword before just wasn't finished, so the next one fails. And at some point you had to start going back and forth between your test suites to test suites and your resource files to figure out what your keyword was actually doing. So to start with those locators, you want your locators, of course, to locate your elements as few times as possible in your code. And technically, there is about 4 places where you can, or 4 ways that you can interact with an element, so you can get some value from it. You can set its value, or perform an action on it, like click, or you can synchronize on it. And if you only have those 4 ways of interacting with your element, you should not have too many places where you have your elements. And if you create that in a single keyword, like here, the set username, and you make that a single action keyword, so it only does that, then when you have only those few keywords, there's no need to abstract that locator into a variable. And actually, you can, if you do need to reuse that same locator because you want to get that value or set that value, you can simply use that same keyword that you already created into a composite keyword, like here the sign in is. And then for the unfinished business. So the keywords, you have a test case, it runs through all its keywords, and then it fails on one of them. And when you look at it, it's like, oh, but it's trying to do something on a page that we're not on yet. So what you want to do is to make sure that keywords always finish themselves. So we created 2 conventions to make sure that our keywords are failing at the right places. The first, most important one is that, especially those composite keywords where you do several actions in the same keyword, it always has to manage whether it is done or not. So for the login, it has to check, am I actually logged in after I've done this keyword? Because otherwise, the next keyword might fail if something happened here. The next keyword needs to know that it can actually already start because the previous one is finished. And the other convention that we have is that a keyword always needs to start with, like, can I start? Am I at the right place? In your web testing, that's usually the first keyword in your composite keyword. If that already fails, then you're actually done, because you're apparently not on the right page. But it has to be the first keyword and then fails. And then the switching back and forth between your test suites and resource files, because you're not completely knowing what you're testing, has especially to do with the layering we already created with the single action keywords and your composite keywords. Because if they are in the same resource file and you're trying to use them, but in your test suites, you want to know that the keyword is actually finished, because that's the convention that we just created. So in this case, if you have those keywords, those composite keywords, the single action keywords, you can create some naming conventions for them so that you always know that it is such a single action keyword and that it doesn't check on itself whether it's done or not. And however you choose those naming, like if you say get, set, and select or something in front of that keyword as a prefix, whatever you choose there, it is something that you decide as a team working on the current project.
So, as testers, we always say, what?
Well, we had a nice animation.
Oh, yes.
Now added conventions to our framework that we currently have.
You stayed quiet. I thought you were done.
Here we are.
Yeah, here I am again. So, as testers, we always like to say we get the stakeholders involved and the business involved. But we actually fear the day those guys or women actually show up. no way we could show them our resources because, well, they are full of expat locators, conditionals, while loops, and other technical stuff. Good chance that if we show them those current resource files, they will look at us like a scared little rabbit that stares straight into the bright headlights of an 18-ton truck right before it runs them over. Pretty sure by now the stakeholders will turn around, run out the door, and you will never see them again.
Well, pitfall closed, crisis averted.
No, we wanted to get the stakeholders involved.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we had to think about this for a while, and what we came up with is that we needed to split up the technical and the functional stuff. And what we did is we came up with a new type of resource file. It's just a normal resource file, but the contents were really functional. So only the functional stuff was in those resource files, and we called those the business objects. And on the other hand, there we put all the technical stuff that did all the if statement and locators and all the difficult things, and we called those the page objects. Well, you can call them whatever you want, but these were the names we came up with. However, when you do this, it did came with a few extra conventions within our architecture. And the first one being that the only resource layer that communicated with the system on the test was the page object. That way we could put all the technical stuff in that resource file, and it wouldn't cloud or complicate the business objects anymore. And the business objects can just focus on the functionality that the stakeholder knows. The second one is that you need to make sure that you use the same logical separation of files as we did earlier. So if you have a business object describing a screen or window functionality, make sure you get a page object on the other side so you know which page object or business object you need to use when working on a special place in your program. And the last convention of this was that you need to have somewhat the same conventions in place, like the single keywords or the combined keywords. So make sure in the business object, if you're doing somewhat the same stuff, just reuse a keyword if you've already created that in the business objects. So by now, the stakeholders will be perfectly able to read the test cases, read the reports, and read the keywords you use in the business object. So now they understand what we mean. And this comes with another advantage, and that is that you can work ahead a little bit more. Because if the system on the test isn't ready, you can still start with making the test cases, you can still start with making the business objects, and the only thing you have to do later on is creating the page objects and connect those to the business objects. So in that way you can just work ahead a little bit more.
So now we've got a place for the interaction with the system under test and with the interaction with our stakeholders. But, well, what we sometimes forget is that if we make our test cases, we go through all the steps, and then we think we're done. And what sometimes happens then is that we have a system that doesn't work, but our test case is not showing it. Well, it did add, in this case, the parcel, but at least that function ran. But if we don't check on it, then we're not seeing that the test is actually failed. So one of the things when we are creating those tests is that we always have to create a validation step. Now, the question is, we already had our complete set of places where we could store our business objects, our page objects, but where should this belong? These are the validations. These are the things that we as testers need. But for the business, it doesn't make sense because, well, if I add a parcel in the system, of course it is there. But we need to explicitly check on it. So to make sure that we don't cloud the business object with validations that only we as testers need, we created yet another layer, but on the same layer as our business object. And we call that the assertion layer. And for the assertion layer, there's tool rules that we apply. One of them is that whenever you need any of the business functionality, you can just use the keywords that you already created because they are there anyway. Or if needed, you can use the page objects that you also have there. But the second one is also very important because if you make sure that that you name your assertions always with the same prefix, we chose validate, as was in the previous example, but if you use validate, then you can always see, if you're looking through a test, that it ends with any keyword starting with validate. Okay, we check something. It doesn't matter what you call it, but make sure that you call it something that everyone knows that that will be the end of the test case.
So by now we've done quite a lot of testing, at least if we add the validations. At least we've done a lot of automating. And somewhere along the way you will wonder how you can go around with your end-to-end tests or even your multi-app testing. And if you're doing so, good chance that you will run to a ambiguous keyword pitfall somewhere. With all the resourcing we've done already, we can fix this quite easily. First of all, let me stretch again that you only want to include a resource file if you use it in the test suite or, for example, in a business or a assertion layer. But even if you've done so, there is a possibility of ambiguous keywords. Well, we came up with a few ideas about that. And the first one being that by now we started to prefix the keywords that we were using in the test suites or in the resource files. So we prefixed it with the name of the resource file that we included. That way we could easily see which resource file of which application was used. And this will probably fix all your ambiguous keywords problems already. Also, it makes it a little bit more readable because you know what you're doing where. You can do this at system test level. That's perfectly fine if you want to. It's just whether your team or not likes it. It does come with a few advantages, but just have a talk about it. And another convention we came up with is that we didn't want to test everything of that gigantic end-to-end test in one test suite anymore. So we created a few test suites next to each other, where each test suite would take care of a big chunk of, well, the end-to-end test or the multi-app test. By doing so, it's easier to switch out or temporarily make another file for that to make sure if an application is temporarily unavailable or isn't ready yet, so you could switch that one out. This does come with one thing, and that is that when you run the test, you have to run the directory as a whole. And the last thing here is that when you're working with setups or teardowns that you have to do for your complete end-to-end test or your multi-app test, we've put those in the very first and the very last file of the directory. So that way it wasn't included in a test suite itself that, well, in that test suite you just want to validate a certain part of the end-to-end test, and you don't want to cloud it with the complete test setup or teardown. So by now, when doing so, you are able to, well, have a good overview of what you're testing where, and, well, you don't have the dreaded ambiguous keywords anymore?
Yes, and, well, arriving at our destination, it is time to think of a little bit about the places that we visited. So we first started with the test suite that directly interacted with our test system under test. And we very quickly found after we left that we should split things in resource files. And it makes sense. I mean, you don't put all your clothes in the trunk. You put them nicely organized in bags. We interact with the system under test through our resources. And then we came with the conventions about our locators, the naming of our keywords, and we said that keywords should make sure that they succeed before handing over to other keywords. Well, we made some new friends. We called them stakeholders. And, well, when you travel across borders, you need some new languages. So we introduced the business object layer. And we started to call our earlier resource files the page objects. Then we had to figure out the must-see attractions for both the testers and our business owners or the stakeholders. So we created the assertions for us as testers, and well, we already had the business objects for our stakeholders. And then, well, if you have really long routes to go to, you need some separate route descriptions for the stints between our stops that we make on our long journey.
So we've made quite a journey. And as with every journey, you got the highlights you always talk about with your colleagues or over a cup of coffee at a party. And you always have those little details that don't seem noteworthy, but they do contribute to the success. During this talk, we only had time to go about the highlights. But we do hope these highlights give you some inspiration for planning your next journey across the robot framework. But feel free to make other choices if you want to visit other places. Well, we hope you enjoyed our journey. We're looking forward to hear about your journey. And we wish you a safe trip. And goodbye.
There are some hoodies for you.
Hoodies!
Hoodies. There you go. There you go. And then we need questions.
Lots of them.
Lots of questions. Good, 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 good. We can start from there, on the left side.
Hello, thanks for your talk. One question I always struggle with is regarding the locators. How do you manage locators which you have to build dynamically? So you have got different information and some of them came dynamically to your locator. How do you manage those?
So that probably has to do with the product you're testing. And one of the things that when I need to do those kind of things, it is also have a little bit of a chat with our developers, because they probably can make something that we don't have to have those dynamic locators. That will make it a lot easier for yourself, and you can actually create those keywords non-dynamically anymore.
Can I elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah.
So when working on that SAP application, we had about the same problem, because every new release of that SAP application, well, every ID was, well, gone to whatever place. But what we've done there is that we use the title. For example, if we wanted to get an input field, we use the title as a locator. So we could do, based on the title, we could find the input field. And what we did there was, for example, validate last name, where last name was a parameter. And in that way, we could get the value of the input field.
Yeah.
Yep. There.
Oh, I can use a sunglass here. Yeah.
Ah, okay, there.
Hi, thanks for the talk. Drilling down on one bit of it, the business layer, it's something that has always, I think, kind of bugged me and always seemed a little bit out of reach, because devs always are a little bit more on the technical side, and the worldview of business people seems to be inconsistent.
At best.
Do you have any experience or advice on how to come to this view on this business layer?
Well, it depends a little bit on what type of organization you're working in, how closely the business is already involved in, for example, the requirements. So that is definitely part of the game. You need to make sure that the business is on board with the requirements, because at the end, as testers, we are testing requirements of the business. So I hope, it's not always that case, but I hope they actually know what they want. But we had a talk earlier about the Gherkin language, and You could also use the Gherkin language, for example, and use those, I think I can call them keywords. Don't shoot me if I don't say correct. But you can use those keywords in the business layer, in the business objects as well. So it's just a layer where you can conversate with the business, with the stakeholders about, do you know what I mean when I say, well, we want to create a new car insurance?
And you can also turn it around that they actually give you the wording of the things that you need to do. Because in the end, the business layer is mostly meant to be able to capture the domain language, so how they say things that are happening in the system.
One question from Slido. I think this might relate to the dynamic naming. So how did you tackle problem of similar name fields in different windows/screens?
Well, do you want to take it or do I?
No, go ahead.
So we, the second pitfall was about where to store your locators. And like Guido said, there are probably 4 reasons why you would want to communicate with a locator. And if you just put those directly into the keyword itself, there's no reason for it to put it up to in a variable section or in a variable file even. So that way, well, if you just put it in the keyword itself, you don't have a problem with variable names.
Yeah.
No,
And you use it at most 3 times, I guess. Get, set, and one of the actions.
We have time for one more question. Let's take it from there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
I hear, but I don't see you.
Yeah, it's me. I'm here.
Oh yeah, there he is.
Hi, thank you for the talk. On one of your slides, you were showing that you are transferring some data between the test suites using some JSON format. I'm just curious what's actually inside.
No, that is just the animation, like the system transferring the information from one system to the other, and we have to do that end-to-end test. So that was the different systems transferring some data.
Okay, so it was not on the level of the test automation,
No,
but on
no.
the level of the application.
Was on the level of the system on the test, yes.
I see, thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's give some love to Guido and Frank. Thank you.